In the 1953 science fiction film The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, a giant monster attacks New York City, as giant monsters are known to do. While the film's plot isn't particularly noteworthy, one element that stands out comes about halfway through the film, when a group of scientists try to figure out the evolutionary history of the mysterious creature. Our interest in the theoretical biology of unknown life forms hasn't gone anywhere. For the past century, stories of cryptids, like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, have continued to fascinate. And while these creatures likely don't exist, that doesn't mean it isn't fun to speculate on their biology. Enter Cryptozoologicon, a book that imagines evolutionary backstories for legendary creatures. Created by renowned paleontologist Darren Naish alongside channel mainstays CM Koseman and John Conway, the volume is so detailed that I had to know more. So, where did the idea of writing a book on the speculative biology of cryptids come from?
The idea did originate with me. I said, well, there's all these creatures in cryptozoology that are posited as potentially real animals, but are essentially exercises in speculative zoology. The cryptozoological literature has got this extraordinary amount of speculation about if these creatures are real, what are they like, what's their evolutionary history.
So, for this entry into the archive, we'll investigate the imagined biology of the world's most famous cryptids. And you can purchase the book and follow and support the creators using links in the description below. Now, let's explore the creatures of Cryptozoologicon. We'll start with the celebrities of the cryptid world, the hairy humanoids best known for their alleged footprints.
The most familiar cryptids are Bigfoot Yeti. Every culture in the world that we know about has legends of wild people of some kind. I think there's a good case to be made that that's a human-wide expectation. I think that's already embedded within our cultural landscape.
Bigfoot and the Yeti may be a socio-cultural phenomenon rather than an undiscovered primate species. But if we were to envision their evolutionary history, an interesting challenge emerges. Just how do these speculative hominids relate to us? And to each other? The Cryptozoologicon team's solution is to imagine Bigfoot and the Yeti as large herbivorous apes, more closely related to orangutans than humans. The project imagines the Yeti and Bigfoot to be close cousins, related subspecies possessing different adaptations for their respective environments. In fact, the Cryptozoologicon team created an entire phylogenetic tree to show how these lineages connect not just to each other, but to other, lesser-known ape cryptids from around the world. The orang pendek, for example, are smaller, red-coated humanoids from Sumatran folklore, which the team pictures as another member of this forgotten branch of the primate family tree. But this is just scratching the surface of the team's creativity. Another famous yet far more unusual cryptid comes from the folklore of the Americas. The Chupacabra is a fabled creature said to drain the blood from livestock like goats. What exactly the Chupacabra is supposed to look like varies a lot between alleged eyewitness descriptions, from a dog-like creature to more of a bloodthirsty kangaroo. If the Chupacabra were a real animal, the team imagines it would be a semi-bipedal nocturnal predator. Yet unexpectedly, the team pictures the Chupacabra as a giant relative of the opossum. The opossum lineage might not seem like the one most likely to produce a bloodthirsty terror of the night, but in fact, the strong jaws and formidable upper canines of opossums would require little evolutionary modification to produce a large-bodied predator. If such a creature did roam the Americas, one would have to be extra careful after the sun went down. When we think about reptilian beasts lurking below the water, many of us might think of the Loch Ness Monster. But off the coast of New Zealand in 1977, a Japanese fishing trawler reportedly found something else. The Zoyu Maru carcass was a corpse the fishing crew accidentally hauled in from the deep sea, which many speculated was some kind of sea monster. Thorough analysis of amino acids in the corpse's muscle tissue later indicated it was in fact the carcass of a basking shark, which had decomposed in a peculiar manner. But what if that wasn't the case? So what was the team's thought process behind reimagining the Mbielu-Mbielu creature?
We are thinking, if we run with this Mbielu-Mbielu creature as if it is an actual cryptid and a new kind of animal, then what would it look like? And the carcass, of course, is a decomposing carcass. It's not pretty. It's got like strands of decomposing flesh hanging off it. So we thought, wouldn't it be fun to imagine that that is the actual creature's real appearance? It's some kind of like hideous zombie deep water creature with sort of tassels and strands hanging off its body, the sort of thing that we do know of in the real world, thanks to peculiar deep sea fishes, various, deep sea anglerfishes and whatnot.
The team goes on to speculate that perhaps the lumps of the Mbielu-Mbielu creature could help it mimic the lumpy, muddy terrain of the sea floor, or even mimic a rotted corpse to appear less appetizing to predators. In either case, it's fun to speculate on, even if the real explanation behind the carcass is less spectacular. According to Aboriginal mythology, the wilderness of southeastern Australia is home to a fearsome creature known as the Bunyip. An amorphous water monster, the Bunyip is often described as a flippered, amphibious animal that attacks from the water. While some depictions of the Bunyip are quite fantastical, others are more grounded, to the point that some have theorized that the Bunyip might be a cultural memory of a large, extinct Australian marsupial, of which there are several. Other theories suggest that the Bunyip actually comes from sightings of animals like the platypus, which frankly does look quite a bit like a mythical creature. But if the Bunyip were an undiscovered animal, the team's concept for the creature is a semi-aquatic marsupial. The idea of an aquatic marsupial presents an interesting challenge, as marsupials give birth to underdeveloped babies that they raise in a pouch. As a solution, the team proposes that, like the unusual South American water possum, the Bunyip's pouch has a watertight seal. Such an adaptation could allow the Bunyip to thrive in aquatic environments, something that real Australian marsupials have struggled to do. The tale of the beast of Gevaudan is one of the most genuinely interesting and intriguing of cryptozoological mysteries. Between 1764 and 1767 in southeastern France, over 70 people seemingly perished from encounters with an enormous wolf-like beast. The beast quickly became legendary, and multiple large wolves believed to be responsible for the beast's attacks were slain during that time. Allegedly, a rogue hyena was eventually caught and killed as well. As unlikely as that might sound, the animal's pelt was documented going on display in Paris years later, confirming that an escaped hyena really did briefly roam the French countryside. In view of all this, it seems the attacks came from numerous culprits, the stories of which were inadvertently combined to form the legend. But now, let's imagine that the beast of Gevaudan was a single undocumented monster. Taking inspiration from reports that the beast had curved claws and a long, slender tail, the team interprets the creature not as a wolf or hyena, but a type of giant mustelid. Mustelids are a family of carnivorous mammals that includes otters, ferrets, and wolverines. This version of the beast of Gevaudan would be an entirely new subset of the mustelid family, and would make the European countryside far more dangerous. Thanks in part to a somewhat notorious faux documentary that aired on the Discovery Channel in 2013, the idea that a certain bus-sized prehistoric shark could still be living undetected has become a popular one. Given your expertise as a paleontologist, just how outlandish is it that the Megalodon survived into the modern era?
There's no chance that it's still alive. It's not really appreciated how poor the case is. Lots of data on the position of Megalodon teeth in the fossil record has shown that this shark did not survive into the Holocene, the modern era, and it probably didn't even definitely survive into the Pleistocene. Most of them have turned out to be older than about 2 million years old, way, way, way before the modern era.
Yet in a speculative parallel universe where the Megalodon did still swim in the seas, what would it look like? In order for a whale-eating shark to remain elusive, it would likely have to have evolved into a deep-water fish that lurks in undersea canyons. The team suggests that this new abyssal megalodon would be a ghostly white and would be a separate species from its Pliocene ancestors. Such terrors of the deep would certainly make swimming more nerve-wracking. On the Indonesian island of Java, a demon is said to fly through the mountains on leathery wings. Infrequent reports from the 1920s describe the Ahool, a bat-like terror with a massive wingspan and the face of a primate. While it's unlikely such an organism ever existed, the concept of a giant bat monster isn't too hard to reimagine as something more biologically plausible. The team envisions the Ahool as an unknown bat lineage even larger than the fox-faced megabats. A burly predator, the Ahool is able to walk bipedally on the ground, bringing prey to the forest floor after tackling them in the air. An aggressive carnivore, this creature possesses a short snout that vaguely resembles the face of a monkey. All in all, it's an astute reimagining of a rather unlikely life form. According to folklore, hidden deep in the misty moors of Scotland lurks a spectral horse. Kelpie is an old Scottish name for an equine monster said to dwell within deep lakes, hoping to drag unsuspecting travelers to a watery grave. Since horses aren't amphibious, the Kelpie is a challenging creature to reimagine as a plausible life form. But there are several hoofed mammal species, like wildebeest or water buffalo, that do routinely wallow in rivers and lakes. More surprisingly, there are even some species of chevrotain, bizarre animals also known as mouse deer, that are known to walk underwater along the bottom of pools. So the team imagines the Kelpie as giant relatives of the chevrotain, that possess thick manes and cloven hooves that make them look superficially horse-like from a distance. Reimagining kelpies as semi-aquatic chevrotains could also explain their occasional carnivorous behavior from the legends, as chevrotains are omnivores. The team imagines the kelpie possess fang-like teeth to drag prey into the water, which would, on occasion, include humans. In the Likwala River region of the Congo Basin, a reptile-like creature with plates on its back supposedly lurks in the swamp. Upon hearing of this creature's description, some outsiders interpreted the beast, called the Mbielu-Mbielu-Mbielu, as some kind of aquatic stegosaur that had miraculously survived the KT extinction event. While this would be cool, it's quite the leap to make, and even for a speculative reimagining, the team found the stegosaur explanation to be too far-fetched.
If you're going to take seriously the idea this is a real animal, then stegosaur is, way down the list of things you could class as probable. And so for Cryptozoologicon, we thought, wait a minute, there's this group of relatively large tropical African fish that have some amphibious capability and have dorsal finlets forming like a single line along the top of the body. They're called the bichirs. So let's have some fun with this. What about the idea that Mbielu-Mbielu-Mbielu is a gigantic, amphibious, unusual bichir?
The team imagines that this speculative life form uses its massive spines to send signals to other members of its kind, and can clamber onto land using its muscular front flippers. It's still a pretty extreme concept for an animal, but less so than an asteroid-proof aquatic stegosaurus. Wherever a dark street winds through the countryside in the United States, the Goatman is supposedly on the prowl. As the jokey nature of the name might suggest, the Goatman is for the most part not taken seriously, and is just meant to be a fun yet spooky urban legend. Exactly what the Goatman is and what it looks like varies between stories, and is generally just meant to be a vaguely humanoid creature that prowls around in the dark. But playing the speculative game once more, the team redesigns the Goatman as a large, human-sized North American monkey, uniquely adapted for rapid bipedal running. They picture these creatures as highly elusive, able to rapidly sprint away from danger, hence the confusion over their appearance. It would certainly be a shock to encounter such creatures, especially since the team imagines they'd be capable of ferocious aggression when the need arises. In the mountains of New Guinea, a report from the 1930s describes a creature from another age. Stunt pilot and self-described adventurer Charles Miller claims he witnessed a towering beast with a long neck and tail emerge from the forest, which he believed to be a lost Mesozoic dinosaur. While the concept of dinosaurs surviving in a lost valley somewhere was a bit of a cultural phenomenon at the time, the report wasn't believed, and years later, Miller all but admitted he made the encounter up. If Miller's monster was a real life form, the Cryptozoologicon team imagines that like Mbielu-Mbielu-Mbielu, it wouldn't be a lost dinosaur, but rather a dinosaur-like offshoot of a modern genus. Taking inspiration from the Galapagos tortoise, they picture the creature to be a turtle offshoot that evolved into a giraffe-like herbivore in an isolated island environment. While not quite a dinosaur, a giant super-necked tortoise would be quite the sight to behold. Arguably one of the most fascinating episodes in cryptozoological history comes from the Colombian-Venezuelan border in 1929. Here, Swiss geologist Francois de Loys took a creepy photo of a deceased primate he claimed was an undiscovered species. The infamous photo was treated with immediate skepticism and has been largely proven to be a white-faced spider monkey that de Loys propped up to make it appear larger than it actually was. But what if the de Loys ape had been a real animal? The team envisions a primate that split off from spider monkeys during the Pleistocene, becoming large bipedal ground dwellers. In our timeline, this lineage includes some of the most intelligent and adaptable primates, so it follows that the larger de Loys ape would be particularly smart, perhaps routinely using tools and seeming almost human-like when foraging and using weapons. One of my absolute favorite aquatic cryptids supposedly dwells in the waters of the North Atlantic, the long-necked seal. Most reports come from the 18th century and describe seal-like creatures with peculiar, elongated necks. The scarce sightings of this creature seem to come from individuals who are unfamiliar with the appearance of sea lions. The team envisions long-necked seals as a genus of pinnipeds that fill a unique ecological niche. Instead of pursuing fish in the open water, these creatures munch on slow-moving sea cucumbers and starfish on the abyssal plain. Their nostrils have evolved into protruding breathing snorkels, meaning that unlike common seals, long-necked seals never have to come ashore. Off the coast of Alaska, another aquatic cryptid comes in the form of the Tizheruk. A sleek aquatic monster, it's possible this creature comes from real sightings of leopard seals, although some legends describe it as having horns. Faced with such a strange mix of features, the team has come up with an ingenious speculative solution. They imagine the Tizheruk to be extraordinarily large pinnipeds, perhaps related to their version of long-necked seals. They envision this creature would eat small marine mammals, and even the occasional human swimmer. Instead of horns, this Tizheruk possesses two soft, retractable structures on the top of its head, which they inflate when displaying to potential mates or rivals. It's an unusual feature, but when one is trying to imagine a plausible version of a seal with horns, one has to get creative. And to conclude our experiment, one of the most bizarre cryptids ever conceived comes from the western United States in the form of hoop snakes. This creature comes from tall tales in the 1700s, which describe a snake that can travel rapidly by grabbing its tail in its mouth to form a hoop and roll like a living wheel. Allegedly, hoop snakes would race across the countryside in pursuit of prey. As you can imagine, this sort of snake is quite the challenge to redesign as a more realistic creature, though not entirely impossible. As unlikely as it might sound, golden wheel spiders do curl themselves into a ball and roll down sand dunes to escape predators. They don't form hoops like the eponymous snake, but they at least show that there is a precedent for turning yourself into a round thing and rolling away at high speeds. The team envisions a hoop snake that has evolved in much the same way. The imagined creature's musculature is specialized around supporting a wheel shape, and its sturdy bones are able to endure the bumps of the road. Furthermore, the interior of its mouth is heavily keratinized and perfectly shaped to latch on to its tail, with a thick keratinous flap sealing the tail in place. The western United States would certainly be more perilous if deadly snakes could roll around at high speeds, but I still find myself wishing I lived in a world with hoop snakes. But according to Darren Naish himself, just because a creature likely doesn't exist, it doesn't mean it can't tell us something about ourselves and our cultures.
I think cryptozoology has an enormous potential to teach us a lot about how we behave. People have these particular kinds of creatures as sort of fixtures of the imagination. You go to a big, deep, cold lake, you look in the water, there's automatically the idea, even if you see absolutely nothing, there's the idea that there could be some giant, scary and predatory monster in the lake. That's like a fixture of our culture. Our species as a whole, we often seem to have the same kind of creatures. For me, it's like cryptozoology is culture, is like firmly embedded within cultures, whether those creatures exist or not.
A tremendous thank you to Darren Naish for speaking to me about cryptozoology. Once again, you can purchase Cryptozoologicon to see more reimagined cryptids and follow and support the creators using the links in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this entry, please lend your support by liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification icon to stay up to date on all things curious. See you in the next video.